Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for an art-based meditation session from the Freer and Sackler Galleries, Smithsonian's National Museum of Asian Art. And welcome back to Philip Bender, one of our incredible meditation teachers in this online space. I'd also like to welcome Jan Stewart, the Melvin R. Seiden Curator of Chinese Art from the museum, who's going to be our spotlight speaker today. I will now turn it over to Phil, who's going to lead us in our meditation practice. And after that, we will hear from Jan and have time for your questions.
Thank you so much, Grace. It really is an honor and pleasure to join you and to take time today with all of you to look closely at another work from the Smithsonian National Museum of Asian Art collection, particularly at the end now of the end celebrations of the Lunar New Year. Today, we'll prepare to view this work, The Treasure Box of Eternal Spring and Longevity, with some breath and gesture. And just to show you what that gesture is going to look like, I'm going to back away from my camera, and I'll invite you to do this at some point. In fact, why don't you try this now? Bring your hands to your low belly. So that's, my thumbs are resting about navel height. And have the left hand on the belly, right hand on top. Doesn't matter so much which, but it'll be helpful when we get going. Now, at some point, I'll invite you to inhale and open the right hand, and to exhale and return. And then we'll do the same with the left hand. Inhaling, opening, exhale, returning. And then on the third inhalation, inhale both hands up. And as you exhale, go ahead and gently touch the face, the heart, and return to low belly. All right, so that's the pattern of movement. Let's try that one more time. Inhaling, right hand opens. Exhaling, it returns. Attention moving with the hand. Inhaling, other hand moves. Exhaling, returning. And then both will move. Inhaling, exhaling, hands to face, to heart, and to low belly. All right, so that'll be coming soon enough. For the time being, get comfortable in your seated posture. If you prefer to lie down, you can certainly do this practice lying down. There's no harm in that. But while you do get comfortable, that is the key, to be relaxed enough, a good enough posture, so that you can settle in and enjoy the next half hour. Now, as you begin to settle in, rest your hands on your low belly. And fill that space behind the hands with your breath, inhaling and exhaling. Give it a good old squeeze. All right, do that again. Inhaling, receiving the breath. Exhaling, squeezing. All right, we'll do a few rounds of this, just kind of priming the low belly, getting it a little more active than it might have been just moments ago. The inhalation is medium to full inhalation. And the exhalation is quite complete. It's physically active, squeezing. Good. A few more. Well, let's do two more. And on the last one, squeeze all the breath out on exhalation. Even hold the breath out for a moment. Hold it out. And soften. Let go of tension. And invite your attention to slip behind the low abdominal wall, to rest behind the hands, into the pocket, behind the navel and down. Now stay there for a bit and breathe. Settling into yourself. In many traditions, the low belly is considered a source of energy, source of life impetus. Maybe we can feel into that today, especially now as we begin our gesture. Inhale, raise the right hand up and out to the side. And exhale, return to the low belly. Inhale, the other hand will move. Exhale, return. Inhale, both hands rise, shining out, and then returning to touch the face, the heart, and low belly. That's all on exhalation. All right, let's continue here. Inhale, right hand. Exhale, return. If the movement of hands is not accessible, move with your attention. Inhale, left hand. Exhale, return. Inhale, both hands blossom spring-like into the air and return with warmth to the face, to the heart, to the low belly. Now, please continue this at your own pace, inhaling, exhaling whenever you return. Your breath rhythm may not match mine. That's fine. Continue at your own pace. It's like you're sharing life's impetus with one hand and sharing it with the other out to the world. And in sharing, you receive in return. Sweet touch of warmth, of chi, life force. Let's do one more round. And when you finish, rest your hands comfortably. That might be at the low belly, it might be at your legs, eyes gently closed. Allow the breath to return to its natural pace. And slip your attention once again behind the low abdominal wall, inward and downward, into that quiet, deep place. Can you sense the bowl-like structure here? The pelvic bowl. Rest your attention there. And while you rest there, imagine this bowl filled with the most brilliant, glorious treasures. The things that you find most valuable. Things that sparkle. Can you imagine this space illumined by an inner light? See that light. Feel it. A bowl full of treasures inside you. Now return your hands to the low belly and bring back your gesture. Inhaling, the right hand gently travels up and away. Exhale, it returns back to the low belly. Inhale, the other hand travels. Exhale, return. And inhale, both hands emanating from this source of light upward. And exhale, returning some of that light to face, to heart, and to low belly. Let's do this gesture 2 more times. Inhaling one hand away, returning. Inhale the other hand, return. Inhale, both emanating from the treasure inside, returning with heat and light to face, to heart, low belly. One more time on your own. When you finish, let go of any tension in the hands, resting them wherever they're comfortable. Eyes closed, attention tucked in behind the low abdominal wall. I invite you now to gently open your eyes and allow the object before you to come to you. Receive it in silence. This treasure box of eternal spring and longevity. Let's take another look. We're approaching it and now looking down at this moon-like shape. Circles within circles. Let's move in a little closer. We'll move in through these clouds and come to this treasure bowl. Just take a moment to look at the objects within. Perhaps some unfamiliar, intriguing in their shapes. Some geometric forms, others are organic. Let's look over here to this dragon-like figure. Take in its head, its powerful claws, its beautiful body, the surface of which is interesting. Let's take a look at the other dragon here. Such a interesting and beautiful face. It too with powerful claws and a surface that's altogether different. Notice this central character. What might it mean, holding such a prominent place in this work? At its very center, this elderly gentleman seated. Now, for the last portion of our meditation, I invite you to place your attention between this gentleman's eyebrows. Just rest your attention there, gently focused on that point between his eyebrows. Continue to gaze there as I back away. Gazing at the space between his eyebrows. And away again. Maintaining your gaze there. Can you also become aware of the space between you and the gentleman? And as you rest your attention, your vision focused on him, can you also become aware of the space between you and him? The space through which you're looking. Your gaze soft. your awareness open. The image alive. Continue to gaze for one more minute while being completely relaxed and gently aware of the space between you and the object of your gaze. May we be open to seeing new things, to experiencing new things, and find in our openness a rebirth of curiosity, an exuberance that transcends age. Now, to close the meditation, I invite you to place left hand on heart, right hand on top, and to bow. Peace, peace, peace.
Thank you so much, Phil, for leading us through that beautiful journey of close looking, taking us so deeply into that artwork. I'd like to invite Jan Stewart now, our curator of Chinese art, to share her thoughts.
Hi, I'm going to try screen share while I want to look at the art. It's perhaps I'm too relaxed to even want to talk. But thank you so much for that, because also in looking at this box, I've never before internalized the light and the treasures. And that was a really new way of looking for me as a curator as well. So thank you. I want to put the box in a little bit more of a historical context, if I may, and look carefully at the design. Historically, this would have been commissioned by the Qianlong Emperor, probably sometime between the late 1750s and the early 1790s. And it is a box with a design that was actually created first by an emperor in the 16th century who was obsessed with obtaining immortality. Hence the idea of the character for spring, which is here in the center, and I'm going to try enlarging it. This is the word for spring. And spring can also mean endless youth and rejuvenation, renewal, continuation. So an emperor who's obsessed with obtaining longevity created this complicated pattern. And then 200 years later, the Qianlong emperor fell in love with the auspiciousness of this motif. And he had quite a few boxes made of this type. And you might be amused to know that in the 1790s, he gave 2 boxes very similar to this to George III, where they're now in the Royal Collection in Britain. So these were considered prestigious objects. And let's look at the design first. I think most often they were used as food boxes to hold gifts of food that the emperor could present to others in the court, including to the empress, to ladies in the court, because they had separate kitchens and they'd send food back and forth. But we also have one story that this shaped box was once used to hold gaming pieces in a board game that was played. But the box is perfectly appropriate for the Chinese New Year. And today is the Lantern Festival, the last day of the formal celebration of Chinese New Year. And it's appropriate for the new year because here is spring. And that's what we have going on at Chinese New Year. It's the coming of spring. The little man in the center, he is the god of longevity. Next to him is a deer, and you can make a pun on the word for deer that also sounds like longevity and also getting a rank in wealth with official position. So this is filled with good things, but especially longevity, because during the 2 week of the Chinese New Year, in traditional times, everyone celebrated their birthday. So again, the idea of longevity is perfect for the timing. Now, you were looking before at these 2 dragons. This one is sort of soft and furry. This one has scales on him. And so we may have something going on with, I'm sure you've all heard the terms yin and yang, the sort of negative, dark, wet, the dry, sunny, the 2 polar opposites. These dragons' different textures seem to capture that. And in fact, Chinese New Year is the point of year when we go from the soft, the wet, the dark, the yin qualities to the robust, dynamic, bright, sunny, yang qualities. So 2 dragons are auspicious in themselves, but here they have a cosmic message as well. Every treasure's in here. So these are representing ignorance or old money. Rhinoceros horn. Rhinoceros horn was an exotic luxury good, but if you drank out of a rhinoceros horn, it would change color if there were poison in it. So it's a good way to think of protecting longevity, no poison. Branches of coral. Coral is a rare material that could be used in elixirs of immortality. Little symbols here that are may you have what you wish, and they also look like the fungus of longevity. So we're piling on wishes. We have money here. These coins even have tiny characters incised in them that say, may there be great peace under heaven. So we also have references to literature. These are rolled up scrolls, and perhaps these scrolls record recipes for elixirs for immortality. We have an endless knot in the center. So there's no beginning, there's no end, longevity. We have a flaming jewel that also comes from the Buddhist tradition. So it is a cornucopia. It is just packed with treasures, with bands of light radiating from the treasures. The technique is using different colors of lacquer. So lacquer is a tree sap. It's been colored here with cinnabar for red. It's been colored with green, with a bottom layer that's hard to see now of yellow. And the design here, it's carved into multiple layers of lacquer. And then these are raised above the surface so much. Look how high they protrude. These actually, new work that I'm doing with our conservation department is showing us, we know from a 16th, 17th century lacquer text that sometimes they would make little pieces of lacquer in separate molds, build them up, and then attach them using wet lacquer so they would stay. So rather than carving that deeply, they have this surface that you carve into with maybe 60, 100 layers of lacquer, and then they can add what would be another 200 layers of lacquer up by making these bits separately and adding them on. So, with that, I'm going to let you ask questions more about the design and the use, but I hope I've shared with you that it's an exquisitely crafted box, very special. Even though the Qianlong Emperor ordered them in considerable numbers, they were only made at the palace. And now I'll turn it over to questions.
Thank you so much, Jan. We have one question from Mary. She was noticing that it seemed that there's a lack of symmetry, and wondering, is that deliberate? And if you could say anything about the symmetry or asymmetry of the design.
Well, I think it is obviously more or less symmetrical. But there is some liberty, which I think gives it some vitality. And I think the fact that the two dragons were treated differently with different surface textures, with one mouth closed, one mouth open, through the asymmetry of these two dragons, I think we're seeing a hint that we're at that cusp in the year when we transfer from yin to yang. We go from one season to another. And so there's a robustness with just being a little bit fresh and off balance to capture that moment of a shift in the cosmos. There's also beautiful treatment of the character. The character for Chun, when you just write it quickly, it has 3 horizontal identical lines in this box-like part. Here, the 3 boxes, instead of being rigidly symmetrical, the artists have made a sort of trapezoid out of this to follow the sweeping brush strokes of these 2 parts of the character, and then gone to a rectangle. So that's a kind of intentional asymmetry. They could have done 3 identical boxes, but instead it's being sensitive to the form of the character.
If we had a chance to take off the lid and look inside, what would the inside of the box look like?
The inside of the box is plain black. Now, there are a number of these boxes in museum collections, and as I said, in the Royal Collection. A few of the boxes have their original lacquer inside, and we know they were plain black. Ours was re-lacquered at some point in its use. This one actually came out of a Japanese collection. So whether it went to Japan in the 18th or 19th century, we're not sure when, but it must have been used heavily. And it's quite frequent when lacquer is used heavily, especially the surface that would receive food, for someone to later re-lacquer it. So this is a very shiny black inside.
We had a question about the sides of the box, or that sort of lower band of imagery and the people and nature depicted there. Is there particular narratives or stories being told in that lower portion?
Good question. I have looked at the 4, and there are 4 that are very similar, but not identical. And the 4 are all of 2 scholars, sometimes with their servants, greeting each other in nature. This one here, one's going to cross a bridge to reach the other. They don't seem to be specific stories as much as a reference to the life of a cultivated man who would enjoy friendship and would enjoy nature. But you do see in all of them pine trees, and pine trees are very much associated with the idea of longevity. So there's subtle references that continue to longevity in the scenes, and the scenes are separated by treasures. So here are crossed rhinoceros horns, and they're so decorated that on the tip of the rhinoceros horn, you have what we in Western culture call the swastika, but really it comes from a symbol that first started in India and then went to China and is associated with the number 10,000 and the idea of infinity and longevity. So we're constantly piling on longevity.
Someone else asked about the bottom of the box. Do we have a picture of the bottom? If you
We
advance,
do
I think the little arrow.
We do have a picture, but the bottom is also a disappointment because our bottom has been relacquered. At the same time the interior was relacquered, the bottom of the box was relacquered. And that's often because bottoms get very scratched and scruffy. Now we know our bottom has an incised rain date saying Qianlong. And we know that these boxes were dated by the emperor. Some of the other ones where the bottoms are not relacquered, we can see that ours inscription follows what would have been the original inscription, but ours is not actually original anymore. And the name of the boxes, calling them longevity or endless spring and longevity and treasures, actually comes from the Qianlong emperor's name for this design.
We have several questions about the process of making the box. And someone asked how many artisans would have been involved? How long would it take? Would it have been carved out of a single piece or several pieces put together? Anything more you could tell us about that?
Sure. With this kind of object, the box is made from pieces of wood. Now, we haven't done enough x-rays of ours to know for sure whether the core is one piece of wood for the lid and one piece of wood for the bottom and then a ring for the ring foot, but it could be two pieces of wood that have been properly joined. So the core is wood. And you have a team of specialists who just make cores. They're different from the team who apply the lacquer. Then when you have your wood core, you have a whole team, many, many people who have harvested the lacquer, who have gotten it ready to use for art. You have a team of people who have colored it. So these are large workshops. There must be 20 to 50 people in some of these lacquer workshops when you count beginning to end. Then you have a much smaller number of people who are qualified for the final decoration. So you have those, and it's an apprenticeship. So you work your way up. So first you learn how to properly apply the lacquer. You apply a single layer at a time. And so here you're alternating colors of yellow, green, and red. You apply a layer and it has to cure. In other words, it dries in a humid environment. Then you have to polish that layer with like a very, very soft charcoal. Then you put on the next layer, you build up the layers. Then you have specialists who know how to carve into lacquer. So you're carving through the red, and then in some places you carve away more of the red and it reveals the green. So you're working through, and that's one group of specialists. Then as we're working on knowing more about applique, you have another person in the workshop who's making these cloud scrolls and making them as small, very high individual pieces of lacquer. And then you have a specialist who will adhere them using wet lacquer and make them stick so that they're permanent. So you probably have, if you went beginning to end from harvesting the lacquer to finishing it, you're going to have at least 50 people who have been involved in the process. But you are definitely going to have one or two senior artisans who are really making sure that the design template is transferred properly and that everything is done to this high standard.
Wow, that's incredible that it would take up to 50 people to make an object like this. It's just the craftsmanship.
Took at least a year.
Wow.
Some very, very exquisite pieces might have taken 2 years because, again, of how slowly lacquer cures layer by layer. You have to let it dry in a very slow process.
And seeing an object like this in person is really a special experience. We hope that you'll be able to come back to our galleries and see this sometime soon. And I just want to thank you, Jan, for taking the time to speak with us today about this incredible object. I also wanted to read one message that Adrienne put in the chat, which is wonderful. She says, Maybe it's because I've been looking at Mars images recently from the Perseverance mission, but the various raised images make me think of a landscape. So I just thought that that was an interesting connection too, is looking at this beautiful red object and all of its three-dimensionality here. So thanks for joining us, and I wish everyone a safe and wonderful weekend.